Good evening for those of us in Southeast Asia, and good afternoon to Soe Tjen
Yes,
in London.
thank you.
Uh,
Yes,
Very
thank you.
happy to have this podcast today on the genocide in Indonesia. I'm Loka Singh. I'm a historian based in Singapore, and I work on people's history and oral history, which is very much the theme under this podcast and webinar series of the under the Banana Tree Archival Network. So let me just introduce briefly the project that we are doing and also about this podcast in particular. So there is the Pusat Sejarah Rakyat in Malaysia, and Zikri in particular, who's coordinating the publicity and the registration. So thank you very much to them for supporting the podcast. The podcast itself, I know the event was framed as a webinar, right? But it's actually a podcast called the Scholar Chronicles Podcast, my podcast, which I use as a platform to invite guests, from academia, from the research world to talk about their research, the story of their research, as well as the relationship between their research and the society which they are researching about. So it's a way for academics to think more broadly about the aims and the purpose and implications of their research. And this podcast on the genocide in Indonesia fits very well into that. I should also acknowledge the Sulin Lewis from Bristol University, who's also very supportive of this podcast. And finally, the grouping, the network, right, which is interested in this archival project, the Under the Banana Tree Archival Network, which I'm part of, and which Zikri and the Pusat Sejarah Rakyat is part of. And there's a number of cultural organizations in Southeast Asia that's also part of this archiving network. So the idea here is to consider ways to research and distribute and circulate people's histories of Southeast Asia. This podcast is based on oral history, and I'll be speaking to my guest about her memories, her stories of her research, as well as what the research that she has done, right? The oral history interview she has done on the genocide in Indonesia. What does this mean for the Indonesian society and the Indonesian social memory going forward as well? So let me just introduce my guest, Soe Tjen Marching. It's a pretty strange name, I must say, and I think I'll be asking her about her name as well as the family history. Soe Tjen is born in Surabaya. She did her PhD in Southeast Asian Studies at Monash University in Australia. She taught there after the PhD for a number of years before moving to the UK in 2016, and she's currently based at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS. Her research interests are the study of languages, gender, Indonesian literature, history, and politics, and of course, a strong interest all through these years on the mass killings in Indonesia in 1965-66. I should also add that Soe Tjen is not just a scholar or an academic, but she's multi-talented. She's a creative writer, written poems, short stories, and novels in both Indonesian and English. She's also a music composer, and she has won awards in practically everything she's done. For our purpose today, our interest is in her work, her interviews in particular on the oral history of those terrible events in Indonesia in 1965-66. And we'll have 45 minutes of this discussion, and subsequently we have a question and answer. Let's begin. All right, so Soe Tjen, very happy to have you with us this evening slash afternoon. How are you?
Yeah. Good, good. And thank you for inviting me.
I think the first question I want to ask is, the personal and the family side of it, because I think a lot of the best research, right,
Yeah.
comes out when there is such an angle to it. So tell
Yes.
us, what do these killings in Indonesia in 1965, 66, what do they mean to you and your family?
Okay, I think I should start about my family story.
Yes.
Okay, so I was born in 1971, after my father was released from prison. So I didn't know that he was in prison when I was young, and I'm the youngest in my family. So my mother and older siblings never told me about my father's imprisonment, although they, of course, had seen my father in prison. That visit, all of them had visited my father when he was in prison. And one day, of course, as a child, you like children like eavesdropping. Yeah, so I overheard one of my siblings mentioned it. So I asked why my father was in prison, why he had been in prison, and they all lied to me. Okay, but they were not good liars, and each of them gave different stories. So my mother said, I think I can't really, like remember what she said, but I think she said my father was a journalist who had written something that was critical of the government or something like that. And then my elder sister said he had been slandered by a friend, and the other sister said, I can't remember, but they all said different stories about my father's imprisonment. So it felt like, for me, it felt like a choose your own adventure story. You go to this person and you get a different story. You get so it's like that for me. It was really confusing. And eventually, I learned that my father had been a political prisoner during the 1965 genocide. And according to my mother, he had not joined any political party, but he had simply been active in a socialist organization, like in a left-wing organization, but was labeled as communist and was imprisoned. That's what my mother said. And my mother warned me not to mention this to anyone. Basically, I think I was already about 12 or 13 at that time when she said, never ever mention this to anyone. And my elder sisters also say, no, if you mention this to anyone, we will be in trouble. So, so I didn't. I kept it quiet. I didn't write about it at all. I didn't even. I just didn't want to go there, near there. But eventually, of course, I was attracted to this more and more and more, especially after seeing Joshua Oppenheimer's film, The Act of Killing. Then I thought, after I saw Joshua Oppenheimer's film, it was really weird because my relationship with my parents was really strange. Even at some point, I hated my father because I thought, well, you've been in prison, and then you kept talking about how great, communist and socialist ideologies were. It was really annoying for me because at school I was told that socialism, communism, in Indonesia, any leftist ideas were considered as communist. Leninism, communism, Marxism, they were considered the same. And atheists, communists are considered atheists. They still think like that. And I was quite religious when I was young, and my father wasn't. So I hated my father. I thought, you've been in prison, and then you kept saying something like this, and it was not great. You know? And eventually, of course, because I read more, and then I realized that what happened in 1965 was not really like what I thought. And I was more and more interested in it. And in the end, I decided to write that book, The End of Silence. I decided to interview survivors And not only survivors, because I believe that the members of the family are also victims. So I interviewed them. And when I was writing this book, I also interviewed my mother about what happened to my father. So my mother told me whatever she could remember. My father passed away in 1998, by the way. And he never mentioned anything about his imprisonment at all to me, never. And so my mother told me whatever she remembered. But then at the end of my stay in Indonesia, when I was about to go back to London, it was only a few hours before my flight to London. My mother called me, like really, she seemed really serious and rather tense. She said, I'm going to tell you something. Now sit down, I'm going to tell you something. And then she said, your father was actually one of the committee members of the Indonesian Communist Party in Surabaya. She only told me a few hours before I flew to London. And then I asked her whether any of my siblings knew about this. She said no. So I was the first person who found out about it from her. And somehow something clicked because of my name. Yeah. My father passed away in 1998, as I said, never spoke about his imprisonment at all. But then I think somehow he wanted me to know about it because he left something in me, in my name. He was the one who named me Soe Tjen Marching. Yeah. And you know, Marching is not my husband's name. And it's not my family name. It's just a name because no one in my family is called Marching. And my father chose for me. And you know where it is from? Can you guess?
I have read it, so I know it's from the Long March, right?
Oh yeah, you read my writing, so you know it's from the Long March of Chairman Mao. Well, I'm not a fan of Chairman Mao, by the way, but yeah, it's because of that. I just realized that maybe he wanted me to one day discover what happened to him. So he left me that name. Although he didn't talk about it, he left me with that name. So something clicked, and I thought, no wonder I carry this name. And because of that, in the end,
the rest of your family members don't have marching in the name.
No, I'm the only one with marching. And I'm the only person who'd never seen my father in prison. So maybe he wanted me to find out what happened to him. To keep searching. Maybe that's what he wanted. Deep inside.
Do you think your father suffered trauma for his imprisonment?
Definitely. Definitely. He was angry easily. He was emotionally unstable. And my mom told me he was not like that before his imprisonment. And he was often just kept quiet for a long time. And he also liked, when I was young, he liked torturing animals, particularly rats, actually, because we had a lot of rats at home, and it was like he was trying to take revenge on the rats for destroying our house or something like that. Yeah, so it was, yeah. So definitely, he suffered trauma, and a lot of people, a lot of political prisoners, they suffer a lot of trauma.
How about your mother? What do you think was the impact of the whole experience on your mother?
I think she's quite paranoid even now. She gets frightened for nothing.
Is she now in Indonesia or with you in Soe?
She's now in Indonesia. She lives in Indonesia. She hasn't read most of my writings, by the way. She has She hasn't read many of my books because I'm sure if she if she reads my books, she'll get freaked out because she keeps saying, "Don't say this, don't say that." She's still really worried, and she keeps saying, the New Order cronies will get back eventually. They still, you know, they still have power, which is right in a way. I mean, Suharto has been anointed as a national hero recently. Yeah. So I used to get pissed off with her because I thought she was paranoid. But now I can understand her more because in a way she's right. Unfortunately, I choose not to keep quiet. I choose to keep speaking up, because if we keep quiet, if we don't speak up, then nothing will change. But it doesn't mean that I don't understand people who are like my mother and choose to not say anything.
I don't know how far this is like a Chinese matter. I mean, you're ethnic Chinese, right? Like me.
Yes.
And in
Yes.
Singapore, we had a film some years ago called Sandcastle, where there's a mother and her son, and she wouldn't tell the son anything about her husband, the son's father, right? Who was a student activist and was in prison as well, detained without trial. And she didn't want to tell the son anything, and the son had to piece together the fragments towards it. And this was a Chinese family, right? These were Chinese middle school students at the time in the 50s. Do you think this was something peculiar, especially to I mean, not to say that other Indonesians don't have this fear of the memory, but do you think this is particularly Chinese as well?
Yes, because the persecution against Chinese Indonesian is still quite strong. And in 1965, Chinese Indonesians were targeted. A lot of them were targeted because they were perceived as many of them, especially the ones who were considered as totok. We know the term totok. Totok means that you were closely connected to China. So you still had like Chinese names rather than other names or Dutch names, because some Chinese people had Dutch names. And they were perceived as being close to China, being close to communists. So that's why many of them were persecuted, because they were Chinese at that time. And interestingly, though, this is the interesting thing. The Chinese people, like my father, who was imprisoned, he was not stigmatized too much by the Chinese community in Indonesia, because the Chinese community perceived the imprisonment of Chinese people as, not well, being communist, yes, but being communist as number two, being Chinese as number one. So my father was not really stigmatized in the community. My family was still being invited to parties, to social gatherings. We were not being ostracized. Whereas the non-Chinese people, they were more ostracized by their communities.
I'm going to kind of shift to your book, right? The End of Silence, published in 2017. I mean, this book is quite remarkable, right? And I encourage the audience to go and look for it on the internet, because I mean, it's based on the interviews that Soe Tjen has done, right, in Indonesia. But rather than kind of weave the interviews into a narrative, she basically allows the interviewees to speak for themselves in their own words. So it's like almost a transcription. There's an introduction in the beginning which situates the need for a voice, right, for agency, and then the survivors and their family members just speak for themselves. How did you plan this book, right? How did you think of this book in this way rather than write a more traditional historical narrative of the genocide?
Okay, so I interviewed several survivors, many of them women. And at the beginning, I wanted to write like a more kind of like traditional book. But then after talking to them, I felt that I have to write a book not only for me, but also for them. So they have a voice and they are happy with what I write. So before I translated into English, I wrote everything in Indonesian, and it went back and forth between me and the respondents until they were completely happy with what I wrote before I published it. So it took a long time because I interviewed them several times. So first of all, usually I interviewed them online via the phone or email or Facebook or online first, or via the phone. And after that, I met them in person. And if possible, I stayed the night with some of them. That was the best when you stay the night and have a chat with them. That's I think that's the best to discover their stories. Because many of them actually when they first told me what happened, they often played down what had happened to them. So this is the completely opposite of the official discourse of these people, of the communist people. How the New Order regime exaggerated the crimes, like it was just like the women mutilated the generals, and they spread lies like anything, just gross exaggeration. But which most of us know now that these are lies. And when I met the survivors, they played down what had happened to them because they were afraid that they would not be believed. So, for instance, I interviewed one woman called Christina Sumarmiati. Initially, I interviewed her online via Facebook, and then she told me she had been imprisoned and tortured. That's it. Eventually, she disclosed that she had been raped. And then later, after I met her and had a chat for a long time, she admitted that she had been gang raped. So, it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And when I stayed with her the second time, she invited 5 other women survivors to meet me. And two of these women had also been sexually abused. One of them had been raped, and one of them was sexually abused. And when they shared their experience together, more stories emerged, and particularly relating to their sexual abuses. So one woman actually told me that after a prison guard brutally raped her, he ordered her to sit down and condemn herself. Then he instructed her to recite the Pancasila. Pancasila is the Indonesian state philosophy, including the principles of belief in God and humanity. So he asked her, okay, recite Pancasila, believe in God, humanity. You must recite it because you are atheist, you are immoral. So after violating these women, the guard still placed the blame on the victims. That's what happened. And we see this pattern everywhere. Perpetrators blaming and stigmatizing victims, finding faults in them as a way to justify what they have done, as if to say that the victims somehow deserve such treatment. And this is the new order. And everywhere, like also, during the Holocaust, during the Shoah, by Nazi, they are really experts at reframing torture and abuse so that these torture and abuses do not appear as inhuman or as persecutions. So they present the torture and abuse as a form of punishment and rectification, in fact. It's like, it's like this abuse, this torture, this rape are a necessary corrective action for the so-called crimes that these victims were accused of.
Yeah, that's quite shocking. Yeah.
It is shocking for me, like when I
Yeah.
heard about it, I was like, I was in shock. Yeah. So they shifted responsibility away from the perpetrators and placed the entire burden on the victims. And the violence becomes rebranded as discipline and as as salvation even. That's what they deserve, basically.
Were there other things, that the interviewees were telling you that surprised you?
Yes, a lot. Like the rape and the brutality, and also how some of them actually have children from the rapists. And yeah, but I can talk about it maybe in relation to my novel, because one of the survivors, female survivors, said to me, "I will tell you as much as possible about me, but please do not publish it." So her story didn't come up in the book The End of Silence in the end, because that's what I promised. I couldn't, do it. But uh, but her story was stuck in my mind for a long time, because she had been accused of being a member of Gerwani, and she was imprisoned, tortured, and raped. And then she had a child from a rapist. Yeah. And in the end, her story found a way into fiction, because I thought, well, how about if I write it as fiction? And she agreed. So with her consent, I gave her a pseudonym, changed her age, place of residence, birthplace, ethnicity, a lot of things, so that people won't find out that it was her. And I can publish it in my novel entitled Dari Dalam Kubur. So that's why I call this novel more real than the factual stories, no? More real than real. Because what cannot come up in the so-called factual book, the one considered as fact, can actually come up in fiction, in my novel.
Yeah, there are many things I want to talk about the book, right? But in the interest of time, let me just focus on a couple, and the rest of the things maybe we can bring up during the Q&A. So one question I do have is, you brought up the Holocaust, right? And in the Western literature on the oral history of the Holocaust or the purges in Soviet Russia by Stalin, the survivors often have gaps in their memory. And what they do is that they kind of try to fill the gaps with other people's stories, or even sometimes with the government stories.
Yes.
Right? Did that occur to you? Did you encounter that?
I'm not really sure, because I believe I did, but I did not really know. You know what I mean? Because when they filled in the gap, then how could I know that they just filled in the gap? But you're right. And I met a victim, a survivor. I shouldn't have said victim. I met a survivor who was not a communist member, but he condemned communism just like the state, almost not similar, not the same, but almost like the state propaganda, claiming that communism and atheism, they were evil, they're the same, and they're evil. I'm not, he said like that. I'm not. I'm a Muslim, I'm religious, but I was slandered. But I'm not a communist. I'm deeply religious. I condemn communism because they're atheists, and they are so he kind of like he repeated the state ideology discourse. That's what happened. And because, the New Order propaganda was so massive, even I was brainwashed when I was a child. I believed that communism and atheism were the same and left-wing ideology was bad. I believed in that when I was young. I mean, what do you expect? I had to read the New Order textbooks. I had to watch the films. I don't know how many films I'd watched when I was young with my friends. So, of course, my brain was shaped in that way. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's hard to tell unless we know the person's history, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask you, I mean, because one of the themes of our network, right, is archive, right?
Yeah.
That we create oral history interviews through our research, but we also try to archive it or share it, publicize it. So what have you done with those oral history interviews that you did?
The oral history.
The interviews themselves, yeah.
The interviews, I had the recordings, and I mainly, though, I wrote down what they said, because towards the end I rewrote. That's what I said. I rewrote a lot because as we went along, the stories change. Because as you said, when people are traumatized, sometimes they try to forget what happened. Yeah, and that's why the interviews took place several times, because the stories could change. And then sometimes towards the end, I don't know which one is the real one, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why I got it back to them and try to kind of negotiate. So this is a matter of negotiation. Their stories. It's not a matter of I wouldn't say that this is the truth. No, the truth is just it doesn't really exist, as you know. I can't be the truth. If memories are so unreliable, and especially when people are traumatized. But this is my book is a matter of negotiation, and it is, for me, it is still important no matter what. Although people can claim, oh, it's not the truth. People forget, but it is important that their discourse has to be heard. Otherwise, we only hear the discourse from the New Order regime. They can just say whatever they want, and they can share as widely as possible, and they don't give an opportunity for another type of discourse. And that's why this is the important thing of oral history. No matter how subjective it is or inaccurate it is still very important to hear another side, to hear another perspective.
So I want to ask you, how was your book received? So Suharto is gone, gone when you published the book. How did the Indonesian state, how did the officials, politicians, how did they react to your book?
I'm going to talk about my novel now, because the End of Silence is not published in Indonesia. Right. So my novel is quite interesting, because my novel was first accepted for publication by Gramedia at the end of 2018. A few months later, the editor of Gramedia informed me that some details had to be altered or omitted due to the sharp criticism of the government, of Suharto's cronies, and certain religious groups. So what can you say about this? Okay. So the fear expressed by my mother or by the survivor was in a way echoed by the publisher. It's not safe to speak out. It's not safe to tell your version of the story, because there has to be only one version. It's the New Order version. that is just so full of lies. And as I said, although oral history is not accurate, although people may forget, but at least that's I feel that that's genuinely from what they experience. Yeah, you cannot be accurate, but it is the representation of what happened. And Gramedia had been attacked several times by the fundamentalist groups, they said. So I almost gave up as well, nearly allowing my novel to be subjected to Gramedia self-censorship. However, after I contacted another publisher, Margin Kiri, who assured me that they would not censor my work, then I decided to withdraw the draft from Gramedia. So I offered it to Margin Kiri. And then, so my novel was published without any censorship. And it has been reprinted 5 or 6 times now. It's been, basically, the publisher said they've reprinted around 9,000 copies, if not more, I think.
What did your interviewees think about the novel? Have they seen the novel as well?
So the woman who was the main kind of like inspiration, once actually shared her hope that one day, that was when I was finishing my novel. I thought that I was about to publish this novel. At that time, I was still with Gramedia. She said that one day it would be safe for her to speak publicly and that she could reveal that she had inspired my novel. That's what she said. So that's her hope. But unfortunately, this would never happen because she passed away before my novel was published. So she passed away at the end of 2018.
Yeah.
Which is quite sad.
Can I ask you in relation to that, right? Like, this is 60 years ago now, actually, this to the year, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
how many of the survivors and their family members are really left today, for us to who can actually remember very well? Are we in a race against time,
Definitely. I don't know how many are left. I mean, not many, because many of the people I interviewed have passed away now, like Christina Sumarmiati passed away. This woman, who inspired my novel passed away. We are in race against time. And that's why the government is so aggressive now in republishing their own version of history. They're just so aggressive about it because they know once they all pass away, they can say, well, they all die. What can you do? You don't know anything. You know nothing about it.
I want to ask you about, you talk about the fear of your mother. You also have spoken about death threats. So, as you know, history and memory are two very dangerous topics, always deeply contested. You are in London, right? And in a way, you're kind of safe. Have you come across people in Indonesia who have suffered reprisal for speaking out?
Oh yes, a lot. Yeah, even I've been threatened. I receive death threats. I receive rape threats, all kinds of threats. And when I was in Indonesia too, sometimes when I gave a talk, people would threaten me. And when I was giving a talk in Malang, some police actually was asking about me and following me a bit. So yes, and when I was in Indonesia, several people have been taken to the police, interviewed, and even one of them was beaten up by the police and had to be hospitalized. And the police actually said to him, here's some money, don't speak up or we will beat you up again, something like that.
I can't remember in your book now. Did you use the actual names or pseudonyms?
Which one?
The End of Silence.
The End of Silence is most of them are the actual names.
Okay.
Only a few are pseudonyms, like only 2 or 3 are pseudonyms.
Yeah, one of them was Chinese, right?
Yes, the Chinese is pseudonym, and you can see because she still she's still afraid of the persecution. Many ethnic Chinese are still, I can say that they're more frightened than the non-Chinese.
Yeah, can I ask you like a delicate question, right? Like, so you
Yes, yes,
decide to use people's names, and I've also used people's names in my work, but also I've used pseudonyms sometimes.
yes.
How do you reconcile the ethics of it, right? Like, if you, how do you weigh the pros of putting their name, and in a sense empowering them and putting their history uh, under the microscope versus the risk that they might face, as a result?
Yeah. I always ask them first, and I always ask whether they knew of the risks. So I talked to them about it really, really carefully, because I said, if you were worried of the risk, then don't do that. But actually, like Christina Sumarmiati or some of the people there said, look, I'm already old. Yeah, so put down my name. They even insisted, put down my name. I'm already old. If they kill me, they can kill me now, and I don't care, because I want my story out. So that's how desperate they are, and they're not afraid anymore. So in the end, I also did it because of them, because that's what they were asking for. Although I before I publish it, I always ask them, I always say to them, there's a risk of this. You might be threatened, I talk to them about it. But they just say, put it down, please. I'm going to die soon. If you don't put it down, I'm going to regret it. That's what they say. Some of them say that.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, there have been many oral histories. I mean, you are not the only one doing these interviews in Indonesia. There have been many groups and networks doing
a lot.
oral history. What do you think generally, right, of the kind of standard of interviewing? Because interviewing is an art, right? And Alistair Thompson, I don't know if you met him when he was at Monash or Melbourne. I think he was at Melbourne.
Yeah.
He said that oral history, you always need training, right? You can't just go into the field and put a microphone in front of someone and ask them questions. So what do you think is the standard of oral history interviewing about the genocide in Indonesia? And maybe what kind of training some of these interviewers need to have,
I don't know about the standard, because when I approach them, it's always different. One different from the other, and I always let them talk as much or as little as they wanted. Never push them to talk. That's first of all. It's never push them to speak. If they don't want to speak, don't push. Never ever push them. And when I started this project, I always thought, this is not for me, but it's for them. So it's to give them a voice, not just my book. It's for them. So I have to remember that every time before I start the interview. I would say, do you want to talk first? And then and I usually ask them, how do you want to be interviewed? How do you feel comfortable with? I just let them speak first, whatever they feel like, and then after that, only after that, then I will meet them. So I think the introduction has to be quite long. You cannot just meet them. You can't, because it's too confronting.
Right.
For me, you have to kind of like find out about them first and introduce yourself. That's what I did. I talked about myself first, and of course, because I'm from the family of the victims, I could say that. So they trusted me more. So I talk about myself. I talk about my sons. I talk how I wanted this book to be like, talk about your project more, so they knew about you, because it's unfair if you ask about them without telling about yourself, about what you were trying to do, what your plan is. It's so unfair. So you have to talk about your. That's what I did. I talk about myself a lot at the beginning to them, usually, and just had a chat first, long chat, before the real interview started.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, right? The oral history is not necessarily just question and answer. I mean, you are really part of it. The interviewer is always very much part of it. And I think especially in your case, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I did. Yeah. A long introduction. And it always started with my story somehow. And they would ask me a lot. They would question me about my father, about myself.
We have been talking about oral history. Did your interviewees also have other kinds of archives, personal letters or drawings or illustrations, things like that?
Yes, actually, a lot of them did, but then most of them were destroyed in prison. Because if you got caught, then you would be beaten up. So it was really interesting. Some of them actually, Christina Sumarmiati, she wrote down the name of the people, and she wrote down, she wrote down quite a lot of things. And then it got checked. So what she did was she ate the paper. It was gone. Things like that. So a lot of them were destroyed. There was one person, he was imprisoned on the Buru Island. And he wrote about it, about his experience. And I still keep the book. Because after he passed away, his son gave the book to me.
Did anyone use toilet paper to write?
Oh, yes. They used anything. Anything. But there's no toilet paper, by the way, in Indonesia. But they used, leaves. Leaves. They use leaves rather than toilet paper. But they used leaves. They used all kinds of things. They used cigarette paper.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because we don't use toilet paper in Indonesia. So.
That's right. In Singapore, we had that. A couple of the political dictators. One of them actually, he wrote rows and rows of toilet paper, and later on they were archived in the National Archives.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's no toilet paper in Indonesia at that time. Now there is. They use toilet paper now, but at that time, no, there was no toilet paper. So no, they used the so-called toilet paper was leaves. they sometimes wrote in leaves. And
I just have one last question before I open up, and that is, what do you hope to see, right, from all this oral history work that you've done, from the novels you've written? What do you hope to achieve or accomplish at the end of it?
Well, a lot, actually. I want the survivors to be heard. I want the history to be rectified. Not now. Like, this is definitely the history in Indonesia is still full of lies. I want the government to acknowledge what really happened in 1965, and then of course bringing the perpetrators to justice, and of course compensate the victims, especially those who still live below poverty line. A lot of them still live below poverty line, and it makes me really angry if I see something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, right? So with respect to the Chinese in particular, did the killings and the kind of the destruction also have this class side to it? You know what I mean? That they impoverish many of the better-to-do Chinese.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Like, it impoverished my family too. In a way, yeah. Because when I was young, I remember we could barely eat. My mother had to save a lot, and my mother couldn't even buy milk for my elder sister, so she had to cook she had to make milk from rice for my sister when she was a baby. And she said that because there was not enough rice for the children, so she made porridge every day. Otherwise, She would not be able to feed all the children if she cooked rice. She had to cook porridge, she said. So and in a way, I can consider myself lucky. Not many victims' family members can go this far. So in a way, I'm very lucky. A lot of them still live in poverty, even under even below the poverty line.
Yeah, I don't know. I think probably you don't know this, but the Indonesian Chinese the wealthier ones who suffered, right, persecution, they sent their money overseas, right, or they fled overseas. And Singapore benefited from it. So we were going through urban renewal at the time. And the authorities here were quite anxious, quite eager to get hold of that money. And I think some of our shopping centers were built with that money.
Huh? Okay. Yeah. Especially in 98, around 98.
98, but also 65,
Also 65,
and also even earlier, right? Like, with the independence, 49, 50.
Yeah. Several incidents, and then they just, the rich ones actually, the rich ones left for Singapore, and the other people, the other Chinese who were not that rich, they fled to Bali, many of them, because Bali was considered like safer for Chinese people.
Question from Nadia. During our interviews, how do you deal with the emotional labor of having to listen to your interviewees? How do you process, and how do you kind of protect yourself emotionally?
I had nightmares. I cried a lot. I just cried a lot. And I really didn't have any strategy how to protect myself, because what I was thinking of at that time was how to get these stories out, how to, work with the victims and get the stories out in a way that they were happy with, and they felt that they had a voice. So that's all I thought. So I in the end, I couldn't really, I didn't have the chance of thinking how to protect myself, because they suffered so much. So how could I think about myself? They suffered a lot more than me. I was just listening. So if I felt stressed out, that's what I thought. That's what I kept reminding myself. When I had nightmares, I always thought, well, don't be a wimp. They suffered more than me. So for God's sake, just continue, just keep going. Just do your work. That's what I told myself. Just don't be weak and don't be a wimp. That's what I kept telling myself. That's it.
I guess Monash University wouldn't be very pleased to hear that they didn't prepare you sufficiently.
I didn't do it when I was at Monash. I did it when I was out already.
You have finished Monash?
I finished Monash already when I started doing the End of Silence.
Were you in an academic institution then?
No, because at that time I just recovered from my cancer. I was not working. I was unemployed for years because I had cancer. So I have to tell you something. I had cancer several times. So I moved here because of my husband. My husband is also an academic, unfortunately. So, my husband got a job as a lecturer at Queen Mary University. So that's why we moved to London. And at that time I suffered from cancer. So cancer loves my body. So I got cancer from 2002 until 2012, several times. So I was not working then, and then I started writing this book when I got the idea was around 2012, 2013. And I was unemployed then because I was looking for a job. I just recovered from cancer. So I was still quite weak. I was looking for jobs. I got part-time here and there. And then only in 2016, I got the permanent post at SOAS.
Yes. Yeah.
So not long ago. Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully my cancer won't come back. That's all.
But maybe just a quick one, like, because the title actually touches on the ideas of genocide. Like, of course, there's a lot of like definition of genocide. So
Yes,
how does it
yes,
actually affect you when you're actually like exploring different forms of genocide? Because as now it's happening in Gaza and everything, and of
yes.
course it's way past beyond that. Briefly, it's about how you actually contextualize genocide, because there's a legal definition of genocide, there's
Oh,
a
yes. Okay.
social
Yes,
ideas
because
about what is genocide. Yeah.
yeah, because it's genocide is usually persecution against like a certain ethnic group or nationality or religious groups, isn't it? Whereas in Indonesia, some people say that it shouldn't be called genocide because it's mass killing. But after the International People's Tribunal in 1965, this has been acknowledged as genocide because a political affiliation should be included in the criteria of genocide. And in Indonesia, there was like genocide of political affiliation of left-wing communists. So it is considered genocide. It can be considered as genocide, definitely now.
I think there's a question from Jason Su. I have a film project on the Communist Party of Malaya. Many of
Yes.
them took refuge in Indonesia in the 50s and 60s to escape from the Malayan emergency. Did you come across any of these stories in your research?
No, unfortunately, I'm so sorry. But I heard about it. I heard about the what happened in Malaya too. And my father was born in Malaysia. And yeah, and my uncle in Malaysia was also imprisoned because of his membership in the Communist Party too in Malaysia. So, but I think between Malaysia and Indonesia there was some people who like it's vice versa. Some Indonesian actually ran away to Malaysia at some point, and then some Malaysian, like if they felt it's safe, then they fled to Indonesia as well.
There is a question on some of the developments in Indonesia. What do you think of, sorry, I can't pronounce the name properly, Sawo Edi Wibowo
Sawo Edi.
statement?
Oh dear. Okay.
The allegation that he was involved in the killing of around 3 million of the left in Indonesia.
Okay. So Sawo Edi was the commandant of mass murder in Indonesia. And he was in, I can't remember what year, I think in 2018, there was a suggestion that he was made into a national hero. And then I created a petition then, and my petition was actually successful. Then he, then that plan was cancelled. And then suddenly now he was made into a national hero, just like that, which was really disgusting. And he proudly claimed that he murdered 3 million people during the 1965 genocide of the communist people. He proudly said that.
What's your view on Syam Kamaruzaman?
Syam Kamaruzaman.
From the PKI, right?
From the PKI, yes. People always think that he is a bit controversial, and some even thought that he was planted there, but I do not know enough. It was I'm not sure whether it was true or it was just it was a slander to create conflict in the Communist Party. I'm not sure, but he was considered as mysterious. Yeah, and some researchers thought that he was actually planted by the military as a spy. But I don't know for sure.
Can I ask you more generally, Soe Tjen, the difficulty, why is it so difficult in Indonesia to come to terms with the killings even though Suharto is gone? I mean, what are the political forces that find it so expedient to keep this narrative of what happened in 1965, the general story, you know? Why is it so difficult to address the history?
Yeah, because the Reformation in Indonesia only toppled Suharto, but it didn't topple the New Order cronies. So the cronies, the New Order cronies, were still very powerful. They still had money. They didn't do anything to Suharto, no? They toppled Suharto, but then he was not brought to court. His money was not touched. So his family still has a lot of money and still powerful, as you can see now. It is the, it is the new order at the moment. It's the revival of the new order era at the moment in Indonesia. So they're still very powerful. And that's why the history is still the same in Indonesia in school textbooks. They're still the same as when, not the same, but similar as when I was young. The torture, is taken out now because of a lot of protests, but it's still the same. It's the PKI purge, the PKI, try to commit a coup against Sukarno, and then they have to be, they have to be murdered. So basically, something like that.
There are some quite interesting comments, and questions in the chat. I'm not going to read them out, but I think one of the things that people are interested in is to see the connections between what was happening in Indonesia in 65 and the Cold War in Malaysia, the Vietnam War.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the mass killings didn't just take place in Indonesia. I mean, it was probably worse there, but there were also massacres in Malaya, in Philippines, in Thailand. There were the crackdown against the student movement.
Yes.
How do you see the possibility of a Southeast Asian, oral history of these kinds of repression and killings and imprisonment?
Yes. So it was actually from, it's in mid-1950s. Sukarno at that time initiated like a diplomatic decision and said that, okay, Indonesia would be non-aligned, because at that time there was like two blocks, the East and the West. It was like in the middle of the Cold War. And they wanted these countries, the Southeast Asian countries, to take side. What do you want, left or right, including Indonesia? But Sukarno at that time said, okay, please, non-aligned. And he somehow asked the Southeast Asian countries to support this position, non-aligned movement. However, the US government was not happy with that. So the US government, the attitude of the US government at that time was either you are with us or against us. And it made Sukarno closer to the Eastern Bloc at that time, and with the Indonesian Communist Party as well. But the West at that time was really, really wary of the communist influence in Southeast Asia, and that's why there was the purge of the mass killing everywhere in Southeast Asia, not just in Indonesia. It's part of the Cold War, actually. And part of this is, one of the main reasons was also the not just ideology, no? It's also wealth. Because the Southeast Asian nations are quite rich in natural resources. For instance, Indonesia, in West Papua, as you know, West Papua now, West Papua has the biggest gold mine in the world. And the giant companies at that time, including Freeport and Exxon and many other, they were really inclined on going to West Papua and other regions in Southeast Asia to get the natural resources. But at that time, because of the influence of the Communist Party, Sukarno said, okay, if you get in, then you get 30%, Indonesia gets 70%. And because they were not happy, they got rid of Sukarno. They installed Suharto, who was pro the West. And then the West got 95% instead of 30%. And that's what happened. In many Southeast Asian countries, that's what happened. The US government installed the so-called leaders who were more obedient to the West. And the strategy in Indonesia was so successful that it was imported to Chile to topple Allende. And that's why the code there to topple Allende was Jakarta method. Operation Jakarta. The Jakarta method is the name of it. It's Operation Jakarta. The operation was called Operation Jakarta in Chile.
Got two final questions. One is,
Yes.
Is there a connection between the 98 anti-Chinese violence and the 65 killings?
Yes. There was, there's a connection between violence in Indonesia from 1965 to the mass killing and rape in Aceh, in Timor-Leste, in West Papua, and then in 1998. It was basically conducted by similar personnel, the military. Because in 98, there were some witnesses who saw that a group of men were brought down from the truck and then spread to the Chinese area, to Chinatown, to commit rape. And then after that, they disappeared. 2 days and then gone. If this was not orchestrated, if this was not planned, I don't know what it was. So this was definitely planned, carefully planned. And no report after that. The report only came up like a few weeks later. And this was done in public. The rape was done in public.
Final question in the chat. How did the Islamic organizations like the NU and Muhammadiyah come to terms with their role in the genocide? What are the other kind of organizations that were kind of implicated, I guess?
Yeah, it's not just the Islamic groups, but in Java probably mainly it's the Islamic group because the majority is Muslim in Java. But in the eastern part of Indonesia, the churches were actually involved. The Protestant churches, the Catholic churches, and there was like this Catholic Catholic priest called Beck, Father Beck. I can't remember his first name now. Father Beck, who was really close to Suharto, and he got involved quite deeply as well during the 1965 genocide. And with NU and Muhammadiyah, they had the so-called paramilitary groups, especially NU. It's called Banser, and they went around helping to murder people as well. However, this is quite interesting. The only Indonesian president who acknowledged this genocide and apologized was actually from NU, Gus Dur, Abdurrahman Wahid. And now actually many NU people acknowledge the genocide. They actually said, yes, we took part in it. They admitted it and it was wrong. And some of them even said that the NU should apologize. And some people from Muhammadiyah as well, I know that they acknowledged it.
It is a very difficult event because, it involves so many people, right? And groups.
Yes. But that was the intention. That was the plan. Involving as many people as possible so that everyone was implicated. So everyone was either communist or against the communists. That's it. That was the plan.
Well, thank you very much for all the questions. So that was the last one, and thank you very much, Soe Tjen, for coming
Thank you.
on and sharing
Thank
your
you so much.
stories. Your family story kind of ties in with the national story and the community story. And I would like to say, you've done a fantastic job of, bringing this difficult episode in Indonesian history to a wider audience beyond academia, right? Academia has had kind of limited impact, right, on the thinking of this event in Indonesia. So, that's what we want to do, right? If any of the listeners are in academia, please always think that your research, which is often funded by someone's money or public money, should have some contribution to the good of our society, right? Whatever the question is, whatever the research is. So thank you very much, Soe Tjen, and I hope we continue to do,
Yes.
your fantastic writing and
Thank
poetry.
you. Thank you for everything. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.